Oh, hey, don't mind me. I'm just doing a little spring cleaning. This is taking up too much room.
I'm a simple man. I like things. And I can't say I'm alone. You walk into any house down the street, I present to you Exhibit A. Yup, that's a thing. There's no need to hide it. Owning physical goods is a part of life. But when does it become excessive?
I'll let you know when I figure that out.
It's no secret that humankind has always been one to be materialistic, but that doesn't mean you can't get by with little to no physical means of entertainment. I mean, hell, kids back then had to make do with playing with a stick in the street, and they didn't even have to take that back inside with them. Usually. But as we move into the modern era with the advent of Bing Bang Boom, we start to see a shift in how us human beings consume entertainment.
Wait a minute, I just realized! This can't play Subway Surfers!
Yes, we now live in the era of digital entertainment, with mediums such as movies, TV shows, music, video games. All of this is how we keep ourselves from thinking about death nowadays. However, as these forms of entertainment became more and more integrated into our lifestyles, you still needed a means of getting that entertainment into your grubby little hands. And that's how we got the advent of what we call physical media. VHS tapes, DVDs, CDs, cassette tapes, records, game cartridges. These, alongside their corresponding playing devices, were all invented for the purpose of bringing the sweet sounds of the Andy Griffith Show into your home. This is how, for many years, digital media was consumed. Yeah, it was all still digitally produced at its core, but it needed a vessel to house this content that was easily purchasable for the time. Things that could easily be stocked on store shelves, i.e. this bullshit. And this is how physical media became a standard for this type of entertainment. I mean, it was basically the main, if not the only option to watch or play this stuff whenever you wanted. You had to go to the store, grab the thing, buy the thing, bring it home, and consume it via physical media playing methods. But we live in a different world now, a better one. I think. Physical media is hardly a necessity nowadays, what with a million different resources available for digital media consumption. You want to listen to a song? Buy it on iTunes. You want to watch a movie? Just get a Netflix subscription. I'm sure the movie you're looking for is there beneath all the tall girls and kissing booths. But even with the transition into the era of the rise of streaming platforms and downloadable media, these two forms of consumption still exist as options for patrons to choose over. And for a while there, we had physical media and digital media living in harmony. But as I've always said as of this sentence, those living in harmony can't live there forever.
Oh boy!
These days we live in a world of physical versus digital. Now, obviously you can still choose between them when it comes to media consumption, but especially in more recent times, there's been much more debate as to which one is superior. So why is this the case? Well, a lot of it has to do with how much more easily available strictly digital media has become nowadays. If you download a movie off of the internet or just decide to watch it through a streaming platform, that's a whole ass trip to Walmart you're saving, and that's priceless. I'm sure more people nowadays have Netflix subscriptions than financial stability. This is all to say, people like convenience. But there's still a lot of people out there that swear by physical media, meaning it's still a relatively profitable market. You'd think! In October of 2023, the major electronic retailer Best Buy announced they would be phasing out physical DVDs and Blu-rays from their store shelves and would no longer be carrying them for the foreseeable future. This was a big deal to hear about. Best Buy has consistently been a Goliath in the digital entertainment sales industry ever since the early 1980s. To hear they were looking to stop selling what once was one of the main parts of their business for years, it was baffling to a lot of people. These people.
Oh, that's me!
Yeah, well, this was a shock to many. Let's be honest here, this was a long time coming. It's true, physical Blu-ray discs have been available for purchase for quite a while now, and DVDs have been around for even longer. But come on, when was the last time you actually bought one of these? Whether or not you want to admit it, physical media is on its way out, and Best Buy is just simply leading the charge. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, man. Walmart announced a similar deal around the same time in regards to physical video games. If we don't see the complete and utter elimination of newly releasing physical media before I develop arthritis, I will be genuinely surprised. But even with all of this on the horizon, most physical media is still going to be around for a really long time, even if it's all only old content in the future. So it's not like we'll ever really be without the ability to choose between physical and digital. And there are still legitimate benefits to each one. Now, if you're curious as to what I prefer, well, what do you think? Listen, I'm more than capable of seeing both sides of the argument here. Yeah, I might own the physical copies of both the Nintendo Switch and Wii U versions of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze when it's really only necessary to own one or the other, but that doesn't mean a thing when it comes to being unbiased about this topic. It doesn't, I swear.
However, if there truly are benefits to both physical media and digital media, let me ask you this. How did we get here? Well, I can only think of one way to find out. The way that involves me talking about it for the next 43 minutes. Which is what we're going with. Without further ado, let's take a look at the history of physical media's downfall alongside the pros and cons of both physical media and digital media to see if we can determine how the hell we got to where we are today. Where did it go?
To begin our story, let's jump all the way back to the beginning with the conception of physical goods. Okay, let's fast forward a little bit. The first major introduction of what we refer to as physical media began in the late 1940s with the invention of the long play, otherwise known as records or vinyls by the common folk of today. These, as many of us know, were used to play music in everyday households at a time when the idea of this was becoming increasingly more popular. There were attempts to bring these to market in years before then, but they usually flopped due to the sparsity of in-home music playing devices, as well as the relatively high price of this type of medium, and in combination with all of this taking place during the Great Depression, yeah, it's no wonder these didn't sell at the time. However, in 1948, a Sony-owned record label named Columbia Records came waltzing in and said, "We're going to introduce what will become the standard way to purchase and play music for the next 20 years, those cocky bastards." And thus the LP became exactly that, and ushered in what is known today as the album era, a time when companies kept selling them and consumers kept buying them. Popular bands all across the world were making most of their money via sales of their music printed onto these records, and allowed for many of them to play around with the idea of concept albums, collections of songs that had shared themes and told stories through the magic of playing these things. It was a great time to buy music, and a bad time to make this bet. Yes, in 1963, humanity saw the release of the compact cassette tape, offering a new alternative method of in-home music playing. Developed by Philips, who at the time specialized in consumer electronics, the main appeal of cassettes was their portability, giving them an edge against vinyl records, considering, yes, bring this on a walk, I dare you. With the introduction of the Walkman in 1979 and gadgets like the boombox, these little guys exploded in popularity, which gave LPs a good bit of competition. However, there were a few drawbacks to cassettes. For one, they were smaller in size, which made it easier for shoplifters to... which did mean a lot of sellers lost out on a good amount of potential sales. And two, they just didn't offer as high of audio quality as vinyl records did. Sure, you could take them with you on the go, but is that really worth much when they sound like this? Okay, yes, I am exaggerating here. Cassettes were more than capable of producing adequate audio quality, and as time went on, they only continued to improve in this department, and by 1985, they finally overtook records as the primary method of musical playback. But that's just talking the purely audio-related media of the time. What about the video side of things? Well, at the time, this world was experiencing a similar story, with the first major success in the home video market also being in a cassette format. There had been an interest in bringing widespread methods of playing visual media to the public for quite some time, going back as far as the use of film projectors, but those were never really affordable for many people, and I don't have any more kidneys to sell, so cassettes will have to do. And thus, in 1976, humanity was graced with the release of the Video Home System, or VHS tape. These were invented by the Victor Company of Japan, or JVC, and were super popular during this era. Any middle to upper class family that lived through the 80s is no stranger to these things. They were everywhere, being the primary way to watch both old and new movies and shows throughout the time period. And as the decade progressed, video cassette recorders, or VCRs, were no doubt a worthy investment, as at the time, VHS tapes were constantly releasing and were quite an affordable form of at-home entertainment. This stick has served me well, but it's time to move on. VHS tapes were heavily marketed during the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, and they sold quite well. which is why, even though they're not sold brand new in retail stores today, you can still find quite a number of them in antique stores and stores that specialize in retro media. I have so much nostalgia for these, man. These were some of the first ways that I watched what I remember as my favorite childhood shows and movies. I would watch Pokémon the first movie and random Thomas the Tank Engine episodes on VHS, the latter being why I have all of this shit. That's right, I was a big Thomas the Tank Engine back in the day. You can tell since I sold one of my kidneys for this trade.
And it was worth it.
VHS tapes were at the top of their game during this era, but this wasn't always the case for the home video scene, as just 1 year before the first public sales of VHS, we would first see the release of the Betamax.
Who?
Another Sony patented endeavor, the Betamax was an alternative form of playing video-based media from the comfort of your home, and did offer a significantly higher video and audio quality when compared to VHS. Released in 1975, Betamax did hold 100% of the market on home video media for a bit there. But in the end, VHS tapes came out on top, and why is this the case? Well, a commonality between both of these formats was that not only could consumers use them to watch preloaded videos, but also record their own via their respective playing devices. And while Betamax offered better overall quality, VHS tapes offered larger amounts of recording space, allowing for a greater range of media to be sold and recorded on them. This proved to be a far more important factor in determining which between the two formats became the bigger commercial success, and thus the VHS market continued to thrive. Meanwhile, if you ask me to show you my Betamax collection, yeah, you know, some say VHS tapes won the war of the two videotape formats due to their larger abundance of pornographic movies being available on them.
I can watch Thomas and the Magic Railroad on this one.
And so, cassettes became the foundation of the home media market, with both music and video being sold primarily via this medium. But there was another form of entertainment that was slowly starting to garner attention from the general public during this time period.
I wonder what that could be.
It was around the time of the 1970s that video games, and video game consoles, began a steep rise in mainstream popularity, and yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you want to let one of these into your house? Oh. Well, people sure did love buying them in the 70s and 80s, and barring the video game crash of 1983, video game cartridges and their corresponding cartridge-based consoles became the main source of profit within the craze. Yes, basically all video games were manufactured and sold via cartridges during this time, with the video game's ROM, or read-only memory, being loaded onto them. Beforehand, video games were either played with the games preloaded onto the video game consoles themselves, or they were just played via arcade machines, but cartridge-based systems allowed for so much more variety on what you could play from the comfort of your own home. Trash and garbage. These were the standard for quite a while, but they were fairly pricey. So between video games, music cassettes, and VHS tapes, video games were the most often coveted as a luxury, something only the more well-endowed folks out there could get their hands on. But the companies that sold physical media knew that this was not the extent of what the future held for them, and moving into the latter half of the 1970s, they continued to dream of a new form factor for their products, one that would not only be cheaper to produce, but one that would expand the world of possibilities of what could be stored on them, both in terms of quality and runtime. And then, in 1978, we got half of that. 1978 saw the introduction of the Laserdisc. Yeah, look familiar?
Oh shit, it's a circle.
Laserdiscs were another format of home video, developed and manufactured by Philips, who you may remember also developed the first cassette tapes. And while VHS was an acceptable standard for the time, Laserdiscs offered a significantly higher video and audio quality. Laserdiscs were a revolutionary invention for the time, and garnered a good amount of sales moving into the 80s and early 90s. But they never reached the same level of mainstream popularity as VHS tapes, at least in most countries. Despite offering better quality, Laserdiscs didn't allow for users to record and store their own media, unlike VHS tapes. At the time, it was quite common for consumers to tape their favorite TV shows for later consumption, since watching media on demand wasn't a thing. And Laserdiscs just didn't allow for that. This, combined with the higher production cost of the Laserdiscs themselves and the relatively high cost of Laserdisc players, meant this technology would unfortunately never be able to stand toe-to-toe with the competition. Plus, I mean, look at these things. They're so big, they take up way too much space.
We need to find a way to make laser discs more compact. Oh!
During the late 1970s, Sony and Philips banded together to develop the compact disc, or CD, which was released to the public in 1982 in Japan and the rest of the world in 1983. Now, these were a game changer. CDs were designed to house purely audio-based media and were heavily influenced by and built off of the laserdiscs that came before them, but with basically everything improved. These were smaller, as the name implies, they had more storage capacity, and outputted better audio quality compared to the competition, and combined with all of that, they were cheaper for companies to produce. After their initial launch in the early 1980s, CDs sold like crazy, and by 1992, they had surpassed both vinyl records and compact cassette tapes as the premier method for consuming audio-based media. I'd say the main drawback to CDs was their inherent frailty. I mean, come on, you take one swing of a hammer at these things, they're toast. Like, what the f***? And yes, the technology was still expensive, especially for the time. But none of that mattered. The demand for CDs was high and they still sold phenomenally well, and because of this, eventually became more and more affordable for consumers over time. And given this sudden and drastic shift in how music was consumed by the public, it was only natural that manufacturers of both VHS tapes and video game cartridges would start to shift their business ventures down a similar path. You see, late into the 1980s, companies would once again be experimenting with video output via disc-based formats, leading to the inventions of the CD-ROM and video CDs. CD-ROMs were mainly used in computers and later for video game consoles during the 5th generation, which included the Sega Saturn and Sony's PlayStation, while video CDs were used by... Yeah, these were never super popular, but they did hammer home the desire for this type of technology, just like me. And finally, in 1996, it happened.
Oh, we also got DVDs.
Yes, we finally made it here. In 1996, companies all across the world began releasing their media on digital video discs, or digital versatile discs, or just simply DVDs. These were to VHS tapes as CDs were to cassettes, and all of the benefits of CDs apply. DVDs were cheaper to produce, had far better storage capacity, and were more compact, measuring the same dimensions as CDs. And if CDs made a splash in the home entertainment industry, then DVDs just drained the whole damn pool. These quickly became the standard for not just home video, but video game consoles as well. DVDs were such a revelation. If you ever saw a VHS tape growing up, I guarantee you saw, if not owned, 4 times as many DVDs. They were so damn popular. And before you ask, yes, I am a f***ing dork.
But why would you need to ask that?
And just like that, disc-based media held dominance on the market. VHS tapes, cassettes, game cartridges, even laserdiscs, they were all still around, but they just couldn't live up to the mass appeal that CDs and DVDs had. Eventually, Sony would go on to develop the Blu-ray disc, which was released to the public in 2006. These held the same form factor as the CDs and DVDs before them, but were able to output video in a far better resolution. This was life now. Circles were in. They were the new hot fad. Everybody had to get them. But you know what's better than a circle? Nothing. Despite discs being a standard for media consumption, there was always that little voice in everyone's head that pondered the question, what if you could watch and consume content whenever you wanted without needing physical goods? And if that wasn't in everyone's head, it was at the very least in mine.
What do you mean I have schizophrenia?
Well, the answer to this quandary would eventually be found, as moving into the late 90s and early 2000s, the advent of the internet was becoming more and more prominent in everyone's lives. And many businesses were taking notice, including a little company by the name of Netflix. You know Netflix, everyone knows Netflix. They're like that guy that always shows up to high school reunions that everyone talks to but no one actually likes. Well, see, at the time of their inception in 1997, Netflix was initially founded as a DVD rental service. At first, they offered rentals by each DVD, but they eventually began offering a subscription service that allowed consumers to rent as many DVDs as they wanted for a small fee each month. These types of businesses were very common during this time period. Stores like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and services such as Redbox were definitely quite popular, and for a good reason. The idea of being able to rent a movie through a DVD or VHS in a similar way you would check out a book from the library just for a small fee, it wasn't just novel, but ideal for many people, especially those that didn't necessarily want to hold on to the movie they were purchasing. I think it was around this time that many people started to realize that while buying DVDs was fun and could be quite convenient, they also tended to take up more space than they wanted. You see, all these different forms of physical media were kept in boxes. I mean, naturally, you had to store them somehow. But boxes, fun little fact, take up a good amount of space, especially when you have quite a few of them.
Have I made that point clearly enough yet?
So yeah, renting movies was an ideal solution to this problem, which is why these video rental services thrived for quite a while there, including Netflix. However, in 2005, a little website by the name of YouTube launched, and that definitely turned a couple heads. Not always for the better. YouTube was an incredible service that allowed anyone to instantly watch video through the process of streaming, which was a fairly new concept at the time. Basically, instead of the content you're watching being read off of a disc, it would be broadcasted to your device through the internet via whatever website you were using.
Did you know that's how YouTube works?
Yeah, it's something we don't think twice about nowadays, but I'll remind you, we're talking about a time period where computers look like this and fast and stable internet speeds look like this. Streaming video wasn't nearly as common then as it is now. And while many tried to make this work in decades beforehand, it wasn't until YouTube popped up that people realized just how ideal it was. But see, we're talking mid-2000s YouTube right now. This was mainly just used to watch cats doing funny shit and low-quality rips of music videos. If you wanted to watch Madagascar, you had to go to the theater or get your hands on the DVD. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, in 2007, the aforementioned company of Netflix began offering a service that allowed for the instant on-demand streaming of movies directly to your home. And you know what that meant. As the next few years passed, Netflix's self-titled streaming service got bigger and bigger. At first, it was just offered to those that were already paying for their monthly charge subscription service, but it eventually became a service on its own, allowing users to stream as many movies as they wanted for just a small fee per month. And this model just became more lucrative with time. Netflix began offering a larger variety of movies and acquired the rights to beloved shows such as Breaking Bad, Friends, and The Office, and all of this led to the amount of Netflix subscribers growing faster than ever. This was now the premier way to watch movies at home. You didn't even have to rent the DVDs anymore. You could just sit your ass down on the couch, hit a few buttons on your remote, pop open a bag of Cheetos, and let your internet do the rest. And other companies took notice, and they wanted a piece of that pie just as much as the next guy.
Oh, what the f***?
Movie streaming, music streaming, video game streaming. As the human race entered the 2010s, this was not just becoming more popular, this was becoming the standard for many folks out there. Streaming services went from a really cool novelty to the reason I can't pay off my mortgage. And due to this rise in popularity of streaming, the amount of people buying brand new physical DVDs, CDs, and video games went down, and only continued to go down. It just didn't make as much sense anymore. Why would I waste time and money and space buying a physical copy of a movie that I'll probably just watch once and forget about after a week when I can just watch it on a subscription service alongside hundreds of other movies for a cheaper price? And this caused many out there to rethink their motives buying physical media in general. It wasn't necessary. Internet speeds were faster than ever. If you wanted to buy a movie, just buy it digitally. It won't take up any space. You don't even have to think about it. Same with music and video games. I don't need circles anymore.
Yeah, physical media isn't nearly as highly coveted nowadays, especially when you consider how popular it was during the 80s and 90s. But that's just a product of the natural progression of this kind of stuff. If we were still only using VHS tapes or even DVDs today, well, we might as well go back to the f***ing Stone Age. But hey, let's take a look at the bigger picture here. There are two sides to every story, even if one of those sides is that. As much as there are genuine reasons to advocate for the use of digital media, there's a similar case to be made about physical media. That's just a fact. But if I'm so insistent that there's truth in that statement, then why has physical media fallen so far from grace? Well, let's see if we can deduce the answer to that question by exploring the advantages and disadvantages to both physical media and digital media, and also see if we can truly understand the appeal of being a hoarder. However, there is one specific aspect of this whole discussion where most of my thoughts on the matter lie, and if you don't think I'm going to talk about that, well, I am so sorry.
This is a physical video game. By purchasing one of these, not only do you receive the game via a playable disc or cartridge, but you also get a nice plastic case to keep it in. Back in the day, you also got a little manual to flip through about the game in question, which was a nice bonus. But nowadays, these aren't nearly as common since, okay, fine, I guess trees are more important. For a long time, buying physical games was the only method to play most of them. Doing so through a monthly billed subscription service or simply through downloading them from the internet just wasn't really possible. If you wanted to play Diddy Kong Racing through anything but a cartridge, well, I got double bad news for you. But times have changed. It's now easier than ever to download games since virtually everyone has quick internet speeds, and physical games are definitely more of a commodity than a necessity. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, I think that looking at all of this, it's not a shock to hear that I've been an avid video game player and buyer for a long time now. I enjoy playing games almost as much as I enjoy buying them. Now, before I go on, I'll just go ahead and take this back from you, thank you very much. But now that we've got that squared away, let's discuss the question, why do I like buying physical games? It's not that I'm against buying games digitally, I have quite a number of games downloaded that I play all the time. But obviously, doing this gives me pleasure and not just sexually. Well, a lot of my lust for physical video games just simply has to do with it being the norm for me for so many years. Growing up, whenever I wanted a new game, I would either get it as a gift for my birthday or Christmas, or I would drive to the store with my parents, point at a game from behind the glass, and then before I knew it, I'd have Paper Mario Sticker Star in one hand and a big old pile of regret in the other. Hell, I didn't even know downloading games was possible until I got my Wii in 2012, and even then, the games I bought were all titles that I couldn't have played otherwise, those being retro Nintendo games from the Virtual Console. Even when I eventually got a Wii U in 2013, I still maintained this mentality and only ever really bought digital games that were exclusively downloadable. Playing games through physical copies was the standard for me, and ever since my childhood, I've amassed quite a collection for myself, one that I've been able to keep in a pretty nice condition, and I take great pride in that. Some may even call me but I maintain, I do enjoy having these games, and I still take great care of them to this very day. Unlike some people. Well, I do think I've gone long enough today without reliving some trauma. One lone day in 2023, I decided to buy some games from GameStop. You know GameStop, everyone's favorite collection of 8 letters. They were having an online sale on new games, which included a couple titles that had been on my radar for a bit. So I decided to pick them up, and alongside eating at Burger King, there were 2 bad decisions I made that day. When the games came in the mail a few days later,
Is this a joke?
my god, these games were in disgusting condition when I got them. For one, most if not all of them had a shit ton of holes in the plastic and or rips in the cover art, clearly from mishandled knife incidents from the people that shipped them. And 2, some of them didn't even come with the original box arts, just those generic cover art sheets that GameStop prints out for games they only have the actual discs and boxes for. And on top of that, they plastered those stupid fucking paper-based stickers on the covers, you know, the ones that never come off in one go, so you end up spending way too long trying to carefully peel them off, only for them to constantly rip and leave sticky residue all over the thing that you're peeling them off of. And then you try to use Goo Gone, but it barely works, so you're just left with games covered in sticker bullshit and Goo Gone that didn't even need to be there in the first place. And now the games remain in shitty condition, so when you put them on your shelf, they just stick to the other games around them. And it's the worst thing I've ever dealt with in my goddamn life! Yeah, I wasn't too happy with the condition of these games. Pre-owned game. Yeah, no shit. So, what does that story have to do with the death of physical media?
Everything!
I think this, right here, is a big reason why so many people don't give a shit about physical media anymore. Because so many people don't give a shit about it! Okay, yeah, it is true that in most cases, the packaging of physical media is the most superfluous part of it. It's needless to say that most people don't tend to go, oh my god, a box?
Take it! Take it!
Yeah, okay, when most people buy physical media, I'm sure most of them out there are more interested in what's on the actual discs and cartridges, not the quality of the boxes that house them. But some people care about that stuff, and those people aren't gonna wanna buy them as often if they look like they were run through a damn garbage disposal. Yeah, I'm sure GameStop knows that most people that buy games from them probably care more about the actual games they're buying, but they didn't take into account that I'm not like most people. Yes, it's true, I do enjoy the containers that I keep my physical media in to look nice. Is that really such a bad thing? Damn it. Well, that doesn't make me any less pissed at GameStop for this. If I buy a game from you that you offer as brand new, I expect everything about it to be brand new. Come on, man, you're not giving physical video games any better of a reputation than they already have. And I mean, yeah, GameStop is not the last major retailer that sells video games, but they're basically the last major retailer that exclusively specializes in video games and related media. I think they're only perpetuating the mistreatment of physical video games. magazines, and physical media as a whole. I'm sure a lot of people think, wow, if the company that sells this stuff doesn't care about their condition, why should I? Look, I'm not saying I'm in the right for buying plastic bullshit, but if I am gonna buy plastic bullshit, I expect it to not look like shit when I get it. But clearly not everyone feels this way, especially those who are simply selling them as products for a profit, and barely a profit at that. The more I think about it, the more I realize this could just be an issue exclusive to GameStop, or at least an issue that doesn't span that many other companies. There are a good number of them out there that do put a lot of care into the design and distribution of the physical media products they sell, even if it's probably a little begrudgingly. I think a lot of companies are actually hell-bent on getting consumers to convert to all digital because they do make more of a profit that way. They don't have to invest in manufacturing physical media if most people just buy their products through a digital store. So if you buy a physical product from a digital media company, you're basically sticking it to the man.
That's right. F you, Nintendo.
Now, you could argue that a downside to physical media is that it does suffer wear and tear over time, regardless of the condition you buy it in. And if it goes through too much, it could end up becoming unusable, and then at that point, it's basically useless. But like I said earlier, so I do put effort into taking good care of my things, and I know I'm not alone in this. But you can't ignore the fact that some people out there just don't feel the same way. Some people just don't care about keeping their things in good condition, and they have a right to, I've been told. And hey, even I have to admit that as much as I take good care of my stuff, physical media does tend to get damaged in some capacity as time passes, even if it is in a minuscule fashion. And as much as I try, even I can't prevent that sometimes.
Damn it!
But with all that being said, let's look at some upsides to physical media, ones that many people would argue are the reasons it's superior to purely digital media, ones that all the 30-something NES fans on Twitter would point out. First off, when you buy physical media, you own it. Wow, Antonio, next I bet you're gonna tell me if I shit my pants it's gonna smell bad.
Well, let me ask you this, smartass. Can you smell me right now?
Okay, let me explain my point here. When you buy a boxed copy of a movie or video game from the store, you now have a physical product that you can hold in your hands, and not only that, it's yours to keep. You can do whatever you want with it. You can watch it, play it, look at it, throw it, have dinner with it, give it a bath. It's a product that you now own. You decide its fate. When you buy a digital copy of something, the insurance you get with it isn't nearly as prevalent. Yeah, you still did purchase it, but without that physical component to it, it's a lot more up in the air on whether or not you're actually going to have access to it forever. In theory, this shouldn't be a problem. Most of the time, pretty much all of the time, when you buy a digital version of a movie or game or anything like that, you're gonna have access to it far beyond the length of time you're probably even gonna want to have access to it. But what if you buy a movie and you wanna watch it later down the road for old time's sake? What a lot of these companies don't blatantly tell you is that when you buy something digitally off of their online store, you're not purchasing the actual content. Rather, you're purchasing a license to authorize the ability to consume the content in whatever restricted fashion the media company allows for. This information is often buried within the terms and conditions agreement that everyone is shown before they use these online stores, and a lot of the time it's very discreetly put and hard to understand for most consumers. And even if you were able to understand it after reading it, when was the last time you bothered to read one of these before going,
just take my f***ing money?
And the worst case scenario regarding all of this is after purchasing a digital product, you go to access it later down the line and your privilege to do so is revoked because the company you bought it from said so. You may not think this ever really happens, but we saw this back in 2019 when Microsoft shut down their long-running ebook service and revoked all access to any books bought via the service during the entire duration of its life. Now, the company did offer refunds to all those purchases, but what if other companies don't with their services? I mean, it is their right not to. But let's be honest here, some people are completely aware of all of this and they don't really care. They're completely fine having disposable experiences. If they buy a movie, it's usually to watch it right then and there, and they're more than content if that's all they're getting out of that purchase. And that's not to mention the fact that some people just have the money to spend on disposable goods. They don't give a shit if they can't access it in a year. I bought this bag of bread a week ago, and the other day, it just vanished.
Yeah, I hate when that happens, but hey, that's just life.
But regardless, you can't blame people for wanting that access guaranteed for as long as possible, especially if they're paying top dollar for this stuff. My point is, buying a physical copy of something is a lot more secure of a purchase. There's no question if it's gonna go away one day. The likelihood of that is all up to you. And that's another positive of physical media. You can make it go away. If you don't want any of your old games or movies anymore, you can resell them or lend them to friends or even donate them if you want to. It's all up to you. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to pay good money for dog shit.
Maybe you wouldn't be so surprised.
Now, when it comes to sharing digital media, yeah, you can still do it. It's just not always as easy to do so, what with needing to share passwords and account information and whatnot. With physical media, all you have to do is say, here you go! You're not legally bound to own any physical goods you purchase, and sometimes you can flip them for a far greater profit if you so please. But on the inverse side of this, owning a physical good means you have a chance to lose it, or worse comes to worse, it could be stolen. But if you're careful with your things, you shouldn't have to worry about that, and personally, I value the insurance of owning the things I buy far more than I don't. What can I say? I just like the safety of knowing where things are at all times.
Thank God.
Now, a lot of people like to preach that a big reason to keep physical media around is the preservation aspect of it, and I have mixed feelings about this. Like I said earlier, just because you buy a physical good, there's no guarantee it's going to last forever. Things can be lost or damaged, and let's be honest, more and more things nowadays are being cheaply produced, and if they do have quality, they're usually really expensive. Most digital goods are always going to be around in some form. You don't need to own them physically to enjoy them. Now, this isn't always the case. There are tons of examples of media that has been lost to time, media that isn't purchasable in the current day, when it was purchasable in years beforehand. But unfortunately, we just don't always have control over this aspect. There could come a day when my copy of Cars 2 doesn't read properly anymore.
And I can't f***ing wait.
Don't get me wrong, I still believe in the preservation of all of this content. Well, maybe not all of it. But regardless if you own something physically or digitally, there's not always a guarantee it's going to be preserved. But even still, the likelihood of content being preserved is higher now than it's ever been before. And it's weird to acknowledge this, but especially with piracy being more and more common nowadays, there's always going to be copies of most digital content floating around out there. Now, I won't be elaborating on this any longer due to... But my point remains the same. Preserve physical media, but don't always sacrifice your integrity to do it. You know, one benefit of physical media that I don't feel like a lot of people tend to think about is the simplicity of it. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying it's necessarily more convenient. Rather, it's easier to understand, at least for a lot of older people. When you buy a movie on DVD from the store, that's just it. You now own the DVD. You can take it home, pop it into a DVD player, and bam, you're watching Nemo. If you're buying a movie digitally, there's a lot more to it sometimes. You have to find the movie within the dozens upon dozens of digital storefronts, make an account on the store page, put in your credit card info, download it to your device, and even when you get through all of that, you need to find where to go to watch the thing. Yeah, all of this is pretty seamless if you're used to dealing with modern technology, but what about those that didn't grow up using it? They're not always going to want to put in the time to learn how to use this stuff, especially if they're already used to things like DVD players. And sure, a lot of that chalks up to stubbornness, but that doesn't change anything. And the same applies to streaming services. Yeah, they can be easier when compared to purchasing digital downloads, but no matter which way you slice it, these two things just aren't always compatible. You think Grandpa ever learned how to use Netflix? Well, joke's on you, cause he didn't, and it's too late to teach him now. You can't deny that a big benefit of using DVDs is how easily understandable it is for many older folks out there. It allows for such a far greater reach of so much great content. And yes, I do think this is a benefit because, fun fact, grandmas watch movies too, but there is always room to learn. And at the end of the day, if an older person isn't willing to learn how to use modern day digital services and streaming apps, they more than likely have someone around to help them with it. Of course, like I've mentioned before, a big draw to the experience of physical media is the collecting aspect. You think I bought all of this because I enjoy the knowledge that I have a hoarding problem? You might be onto something there. It is my fetish. As a resident, I like buying this kind of stuff, especially if I'm really interested in it. Collecting video games is a hobby of mine, and it's the same case for a lot of people, and that extends far beyond the realm of video games. Comic books, movies, TV shows, manga, music. Yeah, these are all things that can be consumed digitally, but it's so much fun to own the physical stuff. And for some content out there, collecting is all the value you're gonna get out of its existence. I mean, let's be real, if you weren't invested in a given movie, why would you want to buy this?
Masochism.
Let's not beat around the bush here. We all have our things that we like to own, things that we like to collect, if you will. And seeing all these things stacked next to each other, or on shelves, or in bins, whatever it may have you, it can just be a lot of fun. What do you mean that's not the definition of fun? Now, practically, Is there any difference in buying a physical copy of something compared to a digital copy? Well, most of the time it's a no. If you buy a physical video game, it's pretty much always going to play the same as if you bought it off of a digital storefront. The files are all the same, it's just a matter of whether or not you want them to be read off of a disc or off of your actual device after downloading it. But through and through, you're still getting the same experience, you just get to decide how you want to have that experience. I mean, how would you rather play Balan Wonderworld? Like this? Or like this? If anything, this just hammers home the reasons why people like digital media. If I'm getting the same experience buying a digital game, is it really worth it to make a point to go to the store to buy the physical version? So with that, let's take a look at some benefits to digital media, otherwise known as the future is here, f***er, deal with it. Yeah, digital media is most likely all we're going to be getting in the future, but there are very fair reasons for that. The big reason is that digital media is just more convenient, and this is practically an overarching benefit that stems from a lot of different details regarding it. For one, it's a lot more streamlined. In most cases, all it takes is a few clicks of a button and bada bing bada boom, you're playing Beast Simulator.
Yay.
If you own a game physically and you want to play it, you have to get out of your seat, find the game, pull it out, walk over to your console, take out any other games that might be in it, put in the new game, and by the time you're done with that, you're...
And now I gotta pick up my plastic skeleton too?
Switching between digital games or movies is so quick nowadays, which is really nice and is why so many people prefer buying all their media in this format. But no doubt, streaming services are the definition of convenience when it comes to digital media consumption. Especially with how fast most people's internet speeds are nowadays, streaming movies through apps like Netflix or Hulu just makes too much sense. And another reason why people like digital media, it can be cheaper. Now, this isn't always the case. You can find secondhand copies of movies and games for pretty affordable prices if you put in the time to hunt for them, in comparison to digital versions of the same stuff, which can oftentimes stay at full price for as long as they're offered. But I'd say I've more commonly seen the inverse of this happen. I've seen far better prices for digital copies of games rather than physical ones, and it definitely is enticing. And this extends to digital game services, like Xbox Game Pass, for example. For just $10 a month, you have access to so many great games, all just a push of a button away. Damn, I'm just really not understanding definitions today. Yeah, specifically with digital games, they can be a hassle to download, especially when it comes to bigger games. Now, this all of course depends on internet speed, the size of the game in question, how much hard drive space you have, yada yada yada, but a lot of people know this going in and are more than willing to put up with it. And I don't blame them, it's still really convenient. Now, this doesn't necessarily extend to game streaming through apps like PlayStation Plus, as that can be a lot more clunky of an experience, but even then, it can be more than tolerable. But when it comes to streaming, doing so with music is always the way to go in my opinion. Streaming a 2 to 4 minute song through apps like Spotify or Apple Music is not only the preferred method for most people, but the method that just makes the most sense. How often are you going to be in a position to pop in a CD nowadays? Especially when most of those CDs only contain one album, or in some cases only a couple songs. Meanwhile with Spotify, you have practically the entire library of all music ever at your disposal to stream, or even download so you can listen to songs offline. And the same applies to movies and TV shows through apps like Netflix. It's usually a very seamless process there, one that can easily make you forget that you're even streaming the content in the first place. As long as you have a stable internet connection, it can very well feel like you practically own a physical copy of the content you're watching. And again, it's all so much cheaper. As long as you have enough funds to spend on the cost of the streaming services themselves, you have so much content at your disposal for such a good price.
Could have been cheaper though.
Yeah, a lot of these streaming services have gone up drastically in price over time. Netflix specifically used to be offered for $8 a month, and for that price, you got everything Netflix had to offer with no ads, in comparison to now where... Jesus Christ. Now, Netflix does offer more content than it once used to, but it still stung for all of the longtime subscribers of Netflix that had to stomach watching their month-to-month costs rise over time. And really, what does all that new content that Netflix offers nowadays really amount to? Yeah, you can find some pretty great movies and shows through their service, but when you're done with all of those, what else are you gonna watch? Real Rob?
Yes.
Another reason to buy digital media, it's better for the environment. As many of you probably know, most modern physical goods are usually made via not so environmentally friendly methods. Whether that be how it's made or the material it's made out of, taking good care of our planet isn't usually on the top of these companies' lists of priorities. Hell, I'm convinced Walmart likes chopping down trees for the fun of it. A lot of these physical media products are made from non-biodegradable materials like plastic, and even ones that are made from paper or cardboard, well, they still cost the existence of one of those oxygen providers. If these companies didn't make physical media, it would in fact prevent a lot of pollution, both from the production process and from the waste the products create. Because even though I like this plastic bullshit, it is still plastic bullshit. To be honest, I think the negative impact that physical media can have on the environment is a very legitimate reason to prefer digital media. Hell, even to argue why it's good that physical media is on its way out. I just think it's ironic that when people preach this, they usually still buy into it in some way. Yeah, we can all be hypocritical here, but let's not pretend like buying a plastic bottle of Coke is any better for the environment than buying Mario Party Island Tour. And in the latter case, it's actually probably better for the environment, because at least with Mario Party Island Tour, I'm not immediately throwing that out after consumption. More so after, like, the third playthrough. But no doubt, the biggest reason to buy into the inevitability of a purely digital future is...
I could be sleeping there right now.
Yeah, as much as I love owning this stuff, I can't deny that it takes up a lot of space. It kind of blindsided me too. I didn't realize how much my game collection was getting out of control until I started actively trying to clean up around my room one day, when I found it harder to do so than usual since I started having less and less space to store my games when trying to sort through other things. And this is a problem that I think a lot of people suffer from. It's really easy to go overboard and spend way too much money on physical goods if you're not careful. And even if you enjoy keeping all of it, if you don't have the proper means to store it or just don't have enough space, it can provide a lot of clutter. And this is the biggest source of convenience when it comes to digital media. Digital media doesn't take up any space, at least not in a physical manner. Sure, things like video games take up a lot of internal or hard drive space, but this is usually a lot easier to manage in comparison to box copies. People nowadays are a lot more willing to invest in digital download space than they are physical copies of the same content. And I think that overall makes a lot more sense. And companies know that, and they want that too. It's way cheaper for them. They don't have to produce the damn DVDs and CDs and whatnot. And you can tell companies are assisting in leading us down an all-digital pathway. There's a reason why not nearly as many DVD players are being produced or sold in today's day and age, and why most modern-day computers don't come with built-in disc trays anymore. Society as a whole wants to move towards only using digital media, but for the people that like having the option to buy things physically, it's definitely not easy to come to terms with. For me personally, I sort of feel for both sides. Sure, I like physical media, but I'm not completely opposed to a future where it's not as prevalent. It's good to be open to change, and deep down in my heart, I know that for myself. Yeah, it's unfortunate in some ways that a day may come when physical media is basically entirely phased out of the general market. But I'm not gonna act like I'll be crying by the time we get there.
'Cause I don't have to act.
Look, at the end of the day, all of this is just stuff. Yeah, it's stuff that's all very near and dear to my heart right now, but it might not always be this way forever. And it still is stuff that takes up a lot of space, stuff that can easily be replicated without the need of a physical format, stuff that I won't eventually even be around to enjoy. And I think the faster that I and everyone else that likes physical media can stomach those facts, the faster we can all be content with a future that might not house a lot of stuff like this. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy it in the moment and continue to enjoy it for as long as we want to. I think as much as people that like physical media need to accept that it might not continue to be made in the future, those that prefer purely digital media should let other people enjoy their things that may mean a lot more to them than others realize. We all have things that have value to us, whether monetary, sentimental, emotional. We all have those things that we cherish, things with memories that we never want to forget. But they are still memories, and if you truly want to hang on to a memory, you don't necessarily need to keep it in the form of a box. Look, all I'm saying is, if you like physical media and have the means to hold on to it without it completely cluttering up your life, you should go for it. But if you don't, you might be better off learning to part ways with it, especially if our society's already heading in the direction of all digital. In fact, we might all be better off that way.
Well, I finally finished up my spring cleaning, and it only took me until it was practically summer to do so. After reflecting on the war between physical and digital media, I think I finally came to a stance on the topic for myself. It's no secret that I love physical media. I think it's fun to collect, fun to display, fun to discuss. But I can't say with great confidence that it's really necessary for me. As much as I enjoyed owning the physical stuff, it might be beneficial for me and the rest of the world to start embracing digital more, especially since it's pretty clear we're heading towards a future where we might not even have a choice in the matter. And looking back at the history of physical media, you can tell the writing was on the wall pretty early on. We went from the big bulky formats of laser discs and VHS tapes to the smaller, more compact mediums such as CDs and DVDs, all the way to more recent times when we basically don't need any of that anymore. No matter what, I'm gonna continue to enjoy the entertainment that I like, with or without tangible products or boxes to store them in. And while that might take some getting used to, I think I'll turn out just fine. Oh shit, Paper Mario came out. Who knew relapsing could be this fun?